Hey there, welcome to Farmcraft. This is the story of me taking this 1952 Johnson engine that doesn't run anymore and bringing it back to life. Far as I can tell, this thing has not run. I'm certain it has not run in 40 years. I'm 48 years old. It may not have run since I've been alive. It has been a very long time. It's a Seahorse 5 horsepower motor. And this was purchased brand new by my grandfather in the 50s. The story on it is the thing will not pull. Hopefully the engine isn't seized and it's the starter mechanism that's broken. This is the fuel cap. That's seized up. That won't come off. This is the high-speed carburetor adjustment and also the primer pump. This is your throttle, stop, slow, start, and then fast. And it has a clutch on it, so this is to put it in neutral, and then when you want it to engage the prop, throw it like that. It also has a fuel shutoff valve. And then the lower unit looks like it probably has a leak because this is pretty oily. So my entire life, this engine has been sitting in my father's garage, all of the garages of the many homes that he's been in over that time. And I've always wanted to see it run, and we're going to do that in this video. So I got off to a really good start. Pun intended. When I pulled off the starter mechanism, I found that it was broken and that the engine itself was not seized up. Yep, the cable was wrapped in underneath. It was originally a rope with a cable core, and the rope had long since broken off, and it was being used with just the cable, which is why it jammed. So I replaced the rope. A look inside the fuel tank revealed lots of old dried fuel and varnish that needed to be cleaned out. Good smelling stuff. I cleaned out the tank with several rinses of denatured alcohol, which helped a lot. And I also cleaned the fittings like the shutoff valve and the filter. Then I checked for spark and did a compression test. I got around 75 psi on the compression. That's a little low, but not too bad. I would have rather it was around 90. I got a couple of new spark plugs. Then, for the first of many times, I removed the carburetor. Here you can see the high-speed needle. I cleaned out all the ports and passages and tore it all the way down to the cork float. Yes, these engines were manufactured with cork floats originally. I cleaned out and rebuilt the primer pump. It has leather seals. I removed the old ones and replaced them with new. I put new O-rings and seals where I could and put it all back together. Do it this way. And we go. Then I put it in a bucket to try starting it for the first time in 50 years. Place your bets. Does it run? Ooh. And I was able to get it running, but there were two key problems that I was about to identify. One was the carburetor was flooding, and two, it's only running on one cylinder here. I learned that it was only running on one cylinder by people in my audience identifying that by watching the video. I just find that so amazing. My audience is freaking awesome. So it was back into the shop to figure out this carburetor. So I noticed when it was running there was fuel just pouring out of this hole, which that's just an open hole into the float chamber. Well, what that tells me is that the float is not working. Either the needle is not sealing or the cork is no longer floating. And it is floating. It might not be floating enough. With some testing, I determined that the needle was not sealing against the seat, so I decided to try lapping it in, which I'm doing here. Some mechanic's probably out there yelling at the computer about what an idiot I am. He's probably right. Here I'm testing the result after my first attempt at lapping. The float is not working. It didn't come easy though. It took several tries to get it right. So after lots of grinding and polishing, I also decided to make a new cork. So let me turn the fuel on. No, I think that might have worked. Hell yeah! Next, let's prove it's only running on one cylinder. They were right! I was not doing anything! I took it back into the shop to check for spark on that plug. So this thing fooled me. It sparked when I first tested it, but once I finally got it running, it stopped sparking. We need to get to the points, which are underneath this flywheel here. First step, clean the points. Then I replaced both coils and both condensers. After assembling, I tested this and got a good spark on both cylinders. Now I really want to start this thing, put it in my pond and drive it around, but before I do that I need to address the lower unit. The oil needs changed and I need to change the water pump. I also need to fix the leaky prop seal. Remember how it was oily at the beginning of the video? And here it got a little difficult. Some parts that make up a seal at the top of the shaft fell out and were very hard to reassemble and added several hours to this project. So here's the water pump housing. This guy, there's our impeller. Well, this doesn't look good at all. Looks like my Johnson exploded. I made some new gaskets. I also did this for the carburetor and a lot of the other parts of the engine. Now I can put the water pump back into the lower unit. There it goes. All right. Now let's see what we can do about this prop seal. Well, I found why it was leaking. I fixed this up and put a new O-ring on it, and that should work just fine. So you remember those parts that fell out? Well, that escalated to the point that I actually had to make a new seal for it, And I'm not going to go through all that again. If you want to see the whole adventure, or you just want more details on any part of this video, watch the full playlist. I'll leave a link in the description. So this is the broken piece, and there's the equivalent in aluminum bronze. I'll get this lower unit filled with oil, and then we'll start it in a bucket and hear it run on 2 cylinders for the first time. But I still had that problem with low compression, so I decided to try Marvel Mystery Oil. Since 1923, we've kept the unique formula of Marvel Mystery Oil a secret, but the results are legendary. Well, let's see. I flooded both cylinders with oil and let it sit for a week, but unfortunately it had no effect on my compression. I also tried this Johnson Evinrude engine tuner, but it didn't work for my engine either. So if I want good compression, I'm going to have to do a total rebuild, so let's start tearing in. I'm going to have to go all the way to the pistons and rings. Head bolts were a little stubborn, but with a torch and some patience, I got them all out. I found both the cylinders and the rings had scoring on them, which is certainly the cause of my low compression. I cleaned everything really well, and here I'm flattening the head and the block. And I honed out the cylinders. And I checked the clearance on my crankshaft journals. If you want more details of what I'm doing here, just watch the full playlist. There we go. It's between 1.5 and 2 thousandths. I'm within spec. Awesome. I couldn't work on my Johnson, not at least polish my crank a little bit. So this one goes in like this, and we're going to do it one ring at a time, basically. There we go. And that piston is in. And there we go. But you want to make sure that you get some oil in here, because when you first start up, you'd be running dry for quite a while. Not good for your engine. You know, that's different. I'm going to have to compare that to previously, but do you hear the there, there? That is crankcase pressure going through the bypass. And I'm pretty sure that it's more than it was before. So that's pretty cool. We are ready to put the head back on. And so my work area is a disaster of tools. I'm going to put all those away. And this is always the anxiety-provoking part. You hope you don't find any extra parts laying around that were supposed to be in the machine. Pretty well cleaned up, and I didn't find any extra parts, thankfully. All right, so we're all ready to start this thing. Ah, crap. It wasn't easy to start. I ended up using a drill, but I did get it running. Unfortunately, it wasn't running as well as I would have liked, but keep watching. This gets better. So here we are after idling for an hour. It already seems to be running better. It'll idle a little lower. It's not going real low. All right, let's put this thing on a boat. You know, a lot of people say I have a small Johnson. I don't know. They don't have to carry this thing around. There's just... So I got the boat on the pond and started it up and ran it around. It ran pretty well. It actually had quite a bit more power than when I had run it previously before doing the rebuild. It still wouldn't idle very well, which was a little bit disappointing, and it was clear to me that something was still wrong with it. But I was pretty happy at how fast it went and how much power it had at this point. And here you can see what I'm talking about with the idle. After breaking it in, I checked the compression again, and I got good compression on both cylinders. Right at 90. Definite improvement on compression. Hell yeah. So now let's see if we can figure out why this thing won't run at low speed. Sometimes just a leaking gasket, especially after the carburetor, can change the fuel mix and mess everything up. There's a trick where you spray something on the gaskets and see if it changes how the engine runs. Here I'm using carb cleaner. So it's right down in here where I'm spraying. Right in that little crevice there. Apparently the carb is leaking there. So some gasket sealer might do the trick. I used some Permatex gasket sealer on that gasket, and here's the result. Still, if I spray a lot, the intake's right there, so just the fumes are going to change it a little bit. But I think that gasket is much better now. So the other thing I did to fix this thing is I checked the spark. But not just check to see if it's there, but actually check the strength of a spark. This is a spark checker, but what you do is put your plug wire on that, and then you put this to ground somewhere. Then you can adjust the width of the gap that the spark is trying to jump. I was only getting a spark capable of jumping like maybe 1/8 of an inch, not that great. So what I did is I went back under the flywheel and I adjusted the coils. These are aftermarket coils. Usually you line these coils up with the metal housing here, and that will make them, put them at the right gap where they're supposed to be. And that's how I put it together. But what I found with some careful measuring was that I had a much larger gap between the coil and the flywheel magnet than I should have. The closer that magnet is to the coil, the stronger the magnetic field, the more current induced, the stronger the spark. So with some real careful measuring and tinkering, I was able to get the air gap between the coils and the flywheel magnet down to like 3/1000 of an inch. And I got my spark much better, able to jump like 1/4 inch. And that's at very low speed. The higher the speed, the more current induced. So that's a really healthy spark actually for how slow I'm turning this over. Running much better now. Much better. I'd put it on the boat and take it for a ride, but this is what my pond looks like right now. Not exactly boating weather. So my plan is in the spring when it warms up, I'm going to take my dad out on a little trip in his old motor. I think we'll enjoy that. You know, in the fast-paced, disposable world we live in, I find fixing something old or building something from scratch some of the most rewarding things that I do. I highly recommend it. Go fix something or build something. Not sure what to work on? Well, I have to recommend working on an old Johnson. No, you can't work on my Johnson. Work on your own. I guess if you don't have a Johnson, you can always work on somebody else's. But seriously, I hope you enjoyed watching. If you liked this video, you'll probably like some of my others. Check out my channel. And if you think I've earned it, consider subscribing, sharing, supporting the channel. There's links in the description. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Actually leaving a wake. Ha ha.